The stars outside the Dawn's edge flickered in their usual cosmic dance as the crew moved about the ship, each task an essential part of their journey into the unknown. But even as the hum of the engines resonated through the corridors, a strange tension had begun to settle over the vessel. Captain Sarah Hall sat at her command station, staring at the data pouring in from the sensors. The readings were bizarre, nothing like any of the known species they had cataloged before. Something dark and foreboding lurked in the blackness ahead of them, a strange anomaly that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent energy. At first, they had thought it was some sort of cosmic storm, but as they drew closer, the anomaly took shape, becoming an approaching fleet of massive ships that tore through the void with terrifying precision. The ship's comm officer, Lieutenant Ferris, flicked the switch on the console and turned toward Captain Hall. His face pale. He spoke, but his voice trembled. "The ships are not human, Captain. They are Xyrethians." Hall froze, the name sending a ripple of fear down her spine. The Xyrethians were an ancient race known for their brutality. For millennia, they had hunted down countless species across the galaxy, wiping out civilizations with ease, leaving only whispers and legends in their wake. "What are they doing here?" she asked, her voice calm, but deep down she could feel her heart racing. This was not a situation they were prepared for. The Xyrethians had never shown interest in human territories. Before, they had only ever appeared on the edges of known space, and now they were approaching with terrifying speed. "It is possible they are searching for something," Ferris replied as the ship's sensors began to pick up the massive warships closing in. "The scans suggest they are preparing to board our ship. It's an attack we need to prepare for." Hall took a breath, standing up and moving toward the holodeck in the center of the command deck. She could feel the weight of her crew's eyes on her every movement. They had faced danger before, but nothing like this. It was clear from the readings that the Xyrethians had no intention of negotiating. They wanted to hunt, and for that there was only one option: they would fight. She quickly issued orders to the crew to prepare weapon systems and to activate all defensive measures. As the ship's hull trembled under the force of the approaching fleet, the first wave of Xyrethian ships emerged from the darkness, their hulking forms massive and imposing, black as the void itself. No sign of life on the outside, just sleek death machines. But inside them were creatures unlike any human had ever seen. Humanoid, but monstrous, twisted, with muscles rippling beneath scales that glistened in the dim light. Their eyes glowed with a predatory hunger that sent a chill down the spine of anyone who met them. There was no mercy in their gazes, only the promise of pain and the instinct to kill. But even as their ships drew closer, there was an odd sense of hesitation among the Xyrethians. Something not quite right. They were preparing to strike, but something seemed to hold them back, almost as if they sensed something they hadn't accounted for. Maybe it was the humans' own presence, or something about them that they didn't fully understand. But in that split moment before the battle would begin, the Xyrethians hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and in that instant Sarah Hall knew that they were not dealing with a typical threat. This would be a fight unlike any other. The ship's alarms blared to life as the Xyrethian warships locked onto the Dawn's edge, their massive forms now filling the viewports. The crew moved quickly and precisely. No panic, just preparation. Captain Hall's voice rang out through the comms, calm and measured. "We engage at full power, all weapons ready, defensive shields at maximum." As the crew scrambled to their stations, weapons primed, Hall could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was not just another skirmish. This was a fight for survival, a fight against predators whose very name had sent shivers through the galaxy. The Xyrethians had never been defeated. No one had ever stood against them and lived to tell the tale. The first volley of energy blasts shook the Dawn's edge as the Xyrethians unleashed their assault. The ship lurched as shields flared up to absorb the blast. The crew braced themselves. The enemy's fire was relentless, but their shields held for now. Hall's eyes flicked to the tactical screen as it updated with incoming data. The Xyrethians were closing in fast, their ships like black behemoths, intent on devouring the Dawn's edge. But something was wrong. As the Xyrethians closed in, their fire became erratic. They were striking with precision, but at times their shots would miss, their coordination faltered for brief moments, as if the Agarthians themselves were unsure of what to do, as if something was making them second-guess their next move. It didn't make sense. The Dawn's Edge was just a small exploration vessel, no match for their firepower, yet these mighty hunters were struggling to finish the job. Lieutenant Ferris, his eyes scanning the redouts, looked up at Hall, his face filled with confusion. "Captain, there's something strange. The Cyrethian fleet systems aren't coordinating properly. Their ships are moving in a disjointed manner. Some of their weapons are missing their targets. We should be dead already." Hall frowned, not understanding what he meant. She turned back to the screen, watching the chaos unfold. The Cyrethian ships were massive, each one a fortress brimming with firepower, and yet they seemed hesitant, almost reluctant to destroy them. It didn't make sense. The enemy had them outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed, but their fire was lackluster, their movements erratic. The crew began to notice it too. At first, it was subtle, a moment of hesitation, here a pause there. But as the minutes ticked on, the Cyrethians' confusion grew more apparent on the battlefield. Their warriors charged in waves, boarding ships, but their strikes lacked the brutal efficiency they were known for. The humans fought back fiercely, but the aliens didn't press the attack. They seemed to be holding back. It was as if they were waiting for something, but no one knew what. In the thick of the chaos, Captain Hall watched as one of her officers, Sergeant Mendez, led a small team of engineers to repel a group of Cyrethian invaders with a level of coordination and discipline that was almost unnatural. Even under fire, they worked together like a single organism, striking with precision and purpose that couldn't be ignored. It wasn't just survival, it was something more. It was an instinct, a fire that burned in every human present, something that no alien could truly understand. And at that moment, as the Cyrethians hesitated again, Captain Hall realized what was happening. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect something deeper, something that no predator in the galaxy had ever encountered before. The Cyrethians weren't just facing warriors, they were facing something they couldn't comprehend: unity, a resolve that went beyond individual survival. It was as if the humans were willing to sacrifice everything for one another, and in the face of that, the predators faltered. Zrak stood at the command center of the lead Cyrethian warship, his cold eyes narrowed as he watched the battle unfold. The humans on board the Dawn's Edge were fierce, no doubt, but there was something more to them, something that unsettled him, the hesitation, the uncertainty that ran through his warriors. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, a species so willing to die, yet so unwilling to surrender. His warriors should have crushed them already. Their strength, their size, should have torn the humans apart, but something was holding them back. It was as though these creatures weren't afraid to die, but feared something deeper, something beyond death. Zrak paced his bridge, his mind racing. There was no logical explanation for it. That Cyrethian hunter knew fear in a way that no other species did when it came to the hunt. He understood the rules, and this was not following them. This was chaos. His warriors moved in fits and starts. They would attack, then hesitate. They would advance, but fall back, unsure whether to strike or to retreat. He growled in frustration. The humans were not meant to make him question his tactics. He had conquered countless civilizations, wiped out entire species with ease, yet these humans seemed to challenge the very nature of combat itself. Something deeper was at play, something primal that his mind could not fully grasp. His second-in-command, Vrax, stood beside him, eyes narrowed as she observed the ongoing battle. "Captain," she said, her voice tense, "the humans are not like any prey we have ever faced. They are not afraid to die. No, not just that, they are fighting with something beyond survival." Zrak turned toward her, his expression hardening. "Explain yourself." Vrax hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the data screens before speaking. "They fight together, not for themselves, but for each other. There is something in their actions, something I cannot fully understand. It's as if they are willing to sacrifice themselves for the others. Without question, no species has ever fought with such unity." Zrak felt a flicker of unease. He had heard whispers from other Cyrethians, tales of the humans and their strange bond, their ability to work as one without hesitation. But he had never seen it so clearly before in the heat of battle. There was something unyielding about them, something that made the hunt feel meaningless. Their will was not their own, it belonged to something greater, something that made them more dangerous than any other prey he had encountered. He looked back at the screens, watching as another group of humans held the line against his warriors with a single-minded focus that was both terrifying and admirable. Vrax continued, "There is no fear among them, Captain, only a drive to protect each other, to survive for the collective rather than the individual. It is as if they are one entity, not many, and that is what makes them so dangerous." Vrax gritted his teeth. The battle was slipping away from him. His warriors faltered time and again. Even when they held the upper hand, they could not finish the humans. They hesitated in the moment of killing. It was as though their own instincts were fighting them. Perhaps this is not just a hunt, he thought. This is something different. The Tyrethians had no concept of mercy, no understanding of this strange force that seemed to drive the humans. But as the battle wore on, and his warriors grew more disoriented, Zrak realized something fundamental was at play here. The humans were not fighting like any prey he had ever known. They were not just trying to survive, they were trying to protect. And that meant no matter how strong the Tyrethians were, the humans would never break. Zrak's command echoed through the ship, his warriors moving into formation, ready for the final assault. But as they closed in on the dawn's edge, something in the air felt different. The tension had shifted. It was no longer just a battle for dominance. It was something deeper. As the Tyrethians boarded the ship once more, they found the humans standing resolute at every corner, each one with a singular purpose: to protect the others. No matter the cost, the Tyrethians came in force, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. But the humans didn't flinch. They met every attack with precision, their defensive strategies flawless. They didn't retreat, they didn't panic, they just held the line. It was as if they were one unit, a collective that would bend, but never break. Zrak's mind raced with confusion. This wasn't a typical battle. The humans were not fighting to win or to defeat him. They were fighting to protect something far more important than their own lives, something that the Tyrethians had never encountered before. The aliens pushed forward with all their might, but still they hesitated. There was something about the humans' unwavering resolve that held them back. A feeling gnawed at Zrak's mind, a sense that his warriors were not just facing an enemy, they were facing an instinct, something primal, something that no matter how strong his hunters were, they could not break. It was as if these humans were more than just flesh and bone. They were something greater, something that couldn't be measured by strength alone. In the middle of the chaos, Captain Hall stood unwavering, her eyes locked onto the advancing Tyrethians. She felt the weight of every person on her ship, knowing that their survival depended not on the weapons they had or the technology they wielded, but on the bond they shared. She glanced over at Lieutenant Ferris, who was coordinating the defense with sharp focus, his expression hard but determined. The crew was holding together, fighting with the kind of unity that was beyond explanation. But in that unity lay their greatest strength, the very thing the Tyrethians could not fathom: the human will to protect each other. No matter what, Zrak's warriors continued their assault, but with each passing minute their resolve weakened. Every time they tried to strike, they hesitated. Each time they thought they had the humans cornered, they found themselves stopped not by weapons, but by something else, something they couldn't see. The humans were fighting with everything they had and more. They fought with something intangible that could not be understood by those who lived only to hunt and destroy. Zrak felt a knot form in his stomach. The hesitation had become contagious. Even his own warriors were beginning to question their actions, to feel doubt about the kill. For the first time in his career, Zrak felt a chill run down his spine. The humans weren't just surviving, they were making him question everything he knew about the hunt. These creatures were different. And no matter how much strength he applied, no matter how many ships he commanded, the humans would not back down. They would not break. They would not give up. The hesitation was spreading like a virus, and Zrak was helpless against it. Every strategy he devised felt useless against this one force that he could not understand, the will to protect. And in that moment, he realized something that terrified him. These humans were not the prey, they were the predators, and they were hunting him. Captain Hall stood on the command deck, her gaze fixed on the tactical displays as the Xyrethians pushed forward again. Their strength was overwhelming, their numbers nearly infinite, yet they hesitated at every turn. Their strikes were less decisive, their attacks more scattered. It was as if they were losing their edge, losing their hunger. She had never seen anything like it before, and it unnerved her more than any alien ship or weapon ever could. She knew that her crew had become more than just defenders. They were not just holding the line, they were the line itself. Each person on this ship was a part of something greater, a collective force that could not be easily understood, but their will was undeniable. The battle continued to rage around them as the humans fought side by side, each movement measured and coordinated, yet instinctive at the same time. It was a dance of survival that few could comprehend, and fewer could challenge. The Xyrethians were relentless, but their tactics were slipping. Their coordinated attacks no longer flowed like they had in the beginning. Now they were clumsy, hesitant. Even though they were still more powerful in terms of sheer force, their spirits were faltering. They could not understand what made the humans tick, what made them fight the way they did. Drax stood in the heart of his command center, his hands clenched into fists, as he watched the scene unfold on his screens. How were the humans still holding their ground? He thought his warriors should have slaughtered them by now. Their morale should have shattered under the weight of his attack, but they fought on. And it wasn't just that they fought, it was how they fought. Their unity, their instinct to protect each other was overpowering. It was a force that Drax had never encountered before, and he knew it was something his kind could never comprehend. They had killed thousands of species in the past. They had broken civilizations and erased entire races from existence. But this was something different. These humans were not like anything they had ever hunted before. Drax turned to Vrax, his second in command, his voice barely a whisper, but heavy with meaning. "Do you understand it now?" he asked. Vrax looked at him, and for the first time she seemed unsure. "We are being tested," she said, her voice thick with uncertainty. "They are not afraid of us. They are not afraid of death. They are driven by something else, something beyond survival." She paused, looking at the image of Captain Hall standing tall in the center of her crew, her eyes fierce with determination. Drax felt it too, the pull, the way the humans had turned the tide without weapons or overwhelming numbers, but with something far stronger, something he couldn't put into words. They didn't have the same hunger the Xyrethians did. They didn't need to conquer or destroy. They didn't need to break their enemies into submission. The humans fought with purpose, and that purpose was to protect each other. Drax's mind churned with the implications. If the humans were capable of this kind of unity, then how could they ever be defeated? How could his warriors ever stand against it? How could any predator claim victory when the prey refused to acknowledge that they were prey? Drax felt a growing sense of unease settle in his chest, something unfamiliar, something that gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something else. And in the depths of that fight, Drax realized they had something he could never take away: the strength of their will. And that alone was terrifying. The battlefield raged on as the Xyrethians continued their assault, but the energy had shifted now. The air on the Dawn's Edge was thick with determination and a strange kind of calm. Each member of the crew knew their role and executed it flawlessly. Their unity had become a force in itself. The human will to protect each other was growing stronger with every moment. They had no intentions of surrendering, no fear of death, no thought of retreat, and it unnerved the Xyrethians more than anything else they had ever faced. Drax watched as his warriors struggled to land decisive blows. Their attacks had become slower, more erratic. Each strike, fueled by doubt, the hesitation had spread like a poison across the Xyrethian ranks. Their instincts betrayed them at every turn. They could no longer trust their strength or their hunger to win. Vrax stood beside Drax, her expression grim as she observed the unfolding chaos. "Captain, we can no longer win," she said, her voice barely audible. "The humans are not fighting like any prey. They are fighting for something greater than survival. Their will is their weapon, and we cannot break it." Drax's jaw clenched as he watched the humans continue to hold their ground with a focus that seemed to defy logic. The humans had no ships, no weapons like the Xyrethians, yet they were winning through sheer force of will alone. This was not a victory of strength or technology, but of something far more ancient, something primal. Drax's pride, his entire identity as a hunter, was under threat in a way he had never imagined. It was not enough to be the strongest, to have the most firepower, to be the predator. No, the humans had something more, something that made them unyielding. And for the first time in his life, Zrak felt something new, a sensation he had never experienced. Before fear, he turned to Vrax, his voice hoarse. "We must retreat," he ordered, the words coming out harsher than he intended, but his mind was clear now. He knew he could not win this battle, not with the humans fighting with such unity, not with their resolve so unbreakable. Vrax looked at him, stunned. "Captain, you cannot be serious," she said, but Zrak only nodded and motioned toward the viewports. The humans had won, the hunt was over, there was nothing more they could do here. They had underestimated the human strength, and now they would pay the price. It wasn't just their weapons or their technology that made the humans dangerous. It was their hearts, their minds, their souls that Tyrethians had come to kill. But instead they had been shown what true power was, what it meant to fight not for dominance, but for something far greater, something they would never understand. Zrak's command echoed through the fleet. "Withdraw," he ordered. "Pull back now." And for the first time in his life, Zrak saw that Tyrethian warships retreating. They left behind a carnage of their failed attack, and the humans stood victorious, not because they had been stronger or faster, but because they had fought for something no predator could take away, something far more powerful than any weapon, the power of the human will to protect. And in that moment, Zrak knew that no matter where he went, no matter how far he traveled, no matter how many species he hunted, there would always be something out there that could not be defeated, something that would forever elude him, the human spirit. As the Tyrethian fleet withdrew into the void, the Dawn's Edge stood firm amid the wreckage of the battle. But the ship was far from unscathed. The hull had been pierced in several places, and many of the crew were nursing wounds. But none of that mattered in the aftermath of the attack. The humans had won not through sheer force, but through something deeper, something that no one could have predicted. Captain Hall stood on the bridge, her face set with a grim determination, her mind still processing what had just occurred. They had survived, but the cost was high. She looked out through the viewport at the retreating Tyrethian warships, still trying to make sense of the events they had just witnessed. How had they done it? How had they managed to turn the tide when they were so vastly outmatched? Lieutenant Ferris walked up beside her, his voice low, but filled with awe. "Captain, there's no way to explain it. We've never seen anything like this before." He paused, looking out at the wreckage that Tyrethians had taken us to the edge of destruction. And then they just stopped. Hall nodded, her eyes never leaving the view ahead. "There's something more to them than we understand," she said softly, "something about the way they fight, the way they protect each other. It's like they draw strength from that connection. It's not just willpower, it's something innate, something in their very being that makes them resist the kind of fear. We know something that Tyrethians couldn't comprehend." Ferris frowned. "You think the Tyrethians realize that too?" he asked. Hall's gaze sharpened. As she thought about it, the Tyrethians hesitated the entire time they attacked. It was as though they were afraid of something they couldn't see or touch. "But they could feel it," she said, her voice quiet but intense. "They weren't afraid of dying or failing. They were afraid of what happens when a species has no fear of death. They couldn't comprehend it. They never have, because to them, it was never about survival or strength. It was always about dominance, control, and fear. But humans, we don't fear death the same way they do. We fight because we have something to protect, and that makes us stronger than any weapon." Hall's words hung in the air for a long moment, as if they carried the weight of an entire truth. The crew around them had grown silent, listening to her. The bond she spoke of was not just theoretical, it was real. They had seen it firsthand in the way the crew had come together during the battle. They fought for each other, for something far more important than survival. Hall turned away from the viewport, her eyes scanning the room as she addressed her crew. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice firm, "but not without compassion. The Tyrethians will be back. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg. This battle was won because we fought with something they didn't expect. But we can't let our guard down, not now." The crew nodded in unison, the tension of the moment still lingering, but they had proven something to themselves and to the galaxy. They could survive, they could fight back, and they could protect each other, no matter the odds. Captain Hall stood tall, facing the crew, her expression resolute. They didn't just defeat an enemy today, they had shown the universe. The humans were not just survivors or prey. They were a force to be reckoned with. They were the hunters now, and the Exorethians were learning that the hard way. Days passed since the battle, and the crew of the Dawn's Edge had settled into a new rhythm, their vigilance heightened. But a quiet confidence had taken root in the hearts of everyone aboard. They had faced down the most fearsome predators in the galaxy, and not only survived but emerged victorious. The scars from the battle were still visible, but the spirit of the crew was unbroken. They had learned something about themselves, something that went beyond mere survival, something that made them stronger than they had ever known. Captain Hall stood on the bridge looking out into the vastness of space, her mind racing with the implications of their victory. She had seen the change in the crew. She had seen how the battle had bonded them in ways that words couldn't describe. It wasn't just about holding the line anymore. It was about fighting for something greater than themselves, something that transcended fear and death. It was about protecting the ones they loved. Lieutenant Ferris approached her quietly, his expression thoughtful. "Captain, do you think they'll come back?" he asked. Hall didn't immediately respond, her eyes fixed on the endless stars outside, as if looking for an answer in the darkness of space. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice steady, but tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "They'll come back eventually," she said, her gaze unwavering. "The Hyrethians are relentless. They don't give up on a hunt. They'll want revenge. But we've shown them something they didn't expect, something that's harder to face than any weapon or army, the human will to protect each other. We've made them realize that we're not easy prey." Ferris nodded, his eyes full of understanding. "But Captain, how do we keep this up? How do we maintain this strength against an enemy like them?" he asked. Hall turned to face him, her eyes hard, but filled with determination. "We keep fighting," she said. "Simply, we keep protecting each other. We keep showing the universe what it means to be human. And when the Tyrethians return, we'll be ready for them. They won't be the ones calling the shots this time. We will." Ferris didn't say anything, but the quiet confidence in his expression said it all. They would be ready. They would fight for each other again and again if they had to. They had learned the true power of unity, the power that no alien species could understand, and the one that would give them an edge against any enemy that came their way. As the crew continued to repair the ship and recover from the battle they had fought, a new kind of bond began to form among them. It was stronger than anything that could be built with weapons or technology. It was the kind of bond that could only come from shared experience, from facing death together and emerging on the other side stronger than before. Even the other ships in their fleet seemed to recognize it as they came alongside the Dawn's Edge. The human spirit had a way of spreading. It was contagious. And it wasn't just the crew of the Dawn's Edge that had been affected, it was the rest of the galaxy too. Word of their victory had spread across the stars, and it had begun to change things. Other species that had once considered humans insignificant or weak began to reconsider their position. The humans weren't just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, and even the mighty Exorethians would learn to fear that force. The Dawn's Edge wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a symbol of the human spirit, a reminder that no matter the odds, no matter the enemy, there was nothing more dangerous than a species willing to fight and die for one another. And that was a lesson the universe would never forget. The stars stretched out before them, endless and infinite. But for Captain Hall and her crew, the journey had taken on a new meaning. The threat of the Hyrethians was still looming, and they knew it was only a matter of time before the predators returned with more ships and more fury. But there was something different now, a shift in the air, something the humans had never known before. It wasn't fear, it wasn't dread, it was something much more powerful, the certainty that no matter how many enemies came their way, no matter how many battles they fought, they would stand together, they would fight together, they would protect each other until the end. The Dawn's Edge moved through the blackness of space. But this time they did not move in retreat. They were not hiding or running from the inevitable. They were preparing, they were training their minds, their bodies, their spirits to face what was coming. They had learned the true meaning of strength. And it was not in their weapons or their technology. It was in the bond they had forged, the human will to protect each other and fight for one another. That was their weapon. And it was something the Tyrethians could never hope to understand. Hall stood on the bridge again, this time her expression calm but resolute as she looked out into the unknown space ahead. She wasn't just looking for the enemy anymore. She was looking for the next challenge, the next moment where they would have to prove their strength once again. Her crew had earned her respect and trust. They had shown her that when everything else failed, when the odds were stacked against them, the human spirit could not be broken. She knew they would rise to any occasion, even if it meant facing down the most dangerous predator the galaxy had ever seen. They had proved it once, and now they would prove it again. We are more than just a ship. We are a force. Hull thought to herself. The bond between her crew was the greatest weapon they had, and as long as they stood together, no enemy, no matter how fierce, could ever defeat them. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future, fighting for each other, and fighting for something greater than themselves. And that was the power that made them unstoppable, the power that had sent the Tyrithians running with nothing but questions in their minds. It was a power that no one could fight against, no one could understand, but everyone would soon learn to respect a power that was unstoppable, because it came from the heart of humanity itself. As the Dawn's Edge continued its journey deeper into the unknown, Hull looked at her crew standing at their posts. Some were tending to minor repairs, others were focused on the tactical readouts, all working in perfect harmony, all united in purpose, and with each passing day their strength grew stronger. She knew that the Tyrithians would return, but they would not be ready for what was coming. The humans had been underestimated before, but no longer now. The galaxy would know what it truly meant to face the will of humanity, and it would be a lesson that no one would ever forget.